I'm a high school theater teacher. One recent afternoon in my social issues theater class, students dwelled seriously for some 25 minutes on the topic they'd chosen to study for the semester, gun violence. When the conversation ended, they sat in absolute silence. How could I transition them from this atmosphere of darkness to one of hope before the bell rang and they were off to their next class? One student enters this classroom every day in a wheelchair. I'll call him Blake. Blake never speaks, rarely moves, and occasionally has fallen asleep because the brain injury compromises his ability to stay engaged. So I had students stand in a circle and I made a small abstract motion with my hand. And I passed it around, asking them to repeat it. And when they came to Blake, who was sitting there in his wheelchair, he had been watching intently and his hands made the motion. Okay, I thought, we're connecting. So then I added a small abstract sound with the motion, and we passed that around. And again, he watched with penetrating eyes. And when it was his turn, his hands made the motion and his voice activated. Then I had the students invent their own sounds and motions, and pretty soon they were giggling and laughing because they were pushing each other to exaggerate the silly sounds and gestures. Blake himself was beaming in a way I had never seen. This activity helped students process from solemnity to lightheartedness. Together, students, including Blake, were participating in a state of what I call intentional wakefulness. Classrooms that heighten intentional wakefulness do so because they tap qualities of resources that are more often associated with spirituality than with secular teaching tools. These are breath, stillness, and kinship. I'm going to talk a little bit about how these three qualities contribute to a secular, spiritually conscious theater education program. But first, some context. Many students sit in their high school classes bored and disinterested because content on state-mandated tests prioritize breadth, how much can we fit into a unit of study, over depth, for how long might we ponder this question. If irrelevant or not rigorous enough come to mind when you think about high school education, I'm not surprised. Claudia Willis, among others, advocate for schools to balance the drive to succeed on state-mandated tests with an increase in rich, mindful reflection. I'm here to push the pitch for deep inquiry further. Learning in high school should be a spiritual endeavor. Now, I'm not linking church with state. Rather, when I talk about spirituality, this is what I mean. Spiritual maturation is a vital core dimension of human development because it strengthens our deepest inner selves. And it happens anytime we consider our abilities to connect with those deepest to us, think about our purpose in life, challenge ourselves to develop self-confidence, to communicate with trust and insight. Theater activity taps this maturation process because it demands that we participate with intentional wakefulness. A visceral sort of learning replaces a far too common numbness. Whenever I see students struggling to comprehend or self-doubts keep them safe within their comfort zones, my awareness taps my resources and I follow through on instinct. One of these resources is breath. In Latin, the word for breath is spiritus. Theater director Joseph Chaikin argues that actors must come to know the life force that moves within them. When actors concentrate on their breathing, they come to understand the living current, the spirit that runs through their bodies. A few years ago, 3 teenage actors were tasked with manipulating a larger-than-life-size puppet that we had constructed to look like Aslan from The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, the production we had been staging. In order to bring this PVC pipe and cardboard giant to life, students practiced breathing together. They would inhale and exhale to communicate Aslan's strong emotions such as pride, reproach, surrender. Breathing together connected 3 puppeteers as one. It was for rehearsals for the same production that I relied upon breath for another reason. About half an hour before technical rehearsals were to begin, students reacted vociferously to a social media post a peer had made criticizing the costume design for this play. And they had overheard a student quip, "Well, everyone knows that actors are better than crew." Hurt, angry, offended, they were in no way ready to enter a rehearsal process with the positive mindset and the concentration required for such an important rehearsal. So I gathered cast and crew together, and I talked to them vehemently about the dangers of posting impulsively on social media, and also a little bit about respect. I asked if any students wanted to say anything else, and one student commented on how theater is family, and another student actually quoted from the script a line about forgiving. How could I transform this family of angry, frustrated, and annoyed adolescents to a place of forgiveness? So I had everyone stand in a circle, and I led us through some deep breathing exercises. As we got to the end, I said, "This time as you exhale, look someone in the eyes. This time when you exhale, look someone else in the eyes. And this time when you exhale, look someone in the eyes and smile." Breath in public school activates life and fosters forgiveness. The second category is stillness. Breathing deeply settles the brain, and adolescents are often surrounded by chaos because the insecurities are great surrounding increasing adulthood. Neuroscientists, in fact, claim that the invasive influence of digital technology further complicates this commotion. Stepping into nature and listening in silence with intentional wakefulness can stir teens' spiritual centers. Each fall, I host an overnight camping retreat in my backyard for the leaders of the drama club that I advise. Students come over, they pitch tents in my backyard, they roast hot dogs, we build a campfire, we sing songs, we tell stories. When they show up, they walk through the gate and they put their cell phone in my hand. I put it in a box which my husband protects, and they disconnect from technology from the moment they arrive to the moment they leave the next morning. One ritual that leads to stillness is a night hike. Around 11 p.m., we pick up our flashlights and we start to walk along the country road that runs alongside of my home. There's laughing, joking, teasing on the way because, walking in the dark just borders a little bit on scary. When we get to the end, about half a mile down, I ask everyone to turn off our flashlights and just listen. I ask them to count the sounds they hear, those first closest to them like their own breathing, and then those furthest away like the bark of a distant dog. Then I ask them to look up at the night sky and pick a star. And as they gaze upward, I discuss their relationship to the universe and invite them to think about the power of their own lives in relationship to their immediate surroundings, the greater world, their future goals. On the way back, the walk is invariably silent. And as we arrive closer to camp, I often overhear them confiding in one another about a family struggle or an inner fear. Stillness in public school helps students deepen their inner selves. The third category is kinship. Intentional wakefulness, when shared, leads to kinship. Oftentimes, teenagers appreciate feeling a strong sense of belonging because they can feel lost when thinking about who they are and who they want to become. In addition to stillness, theater activity that involves ritual leads to kinship. One silent ritual precedes every performance that we do. Cast and crew enter into a circle and we cross right hand over left. And each one of us, I tell them, is going to think of a warm, positive thought. And we're going to pass that thought around the circle one by squeezing the hand to our left. As this ritual proceeds, it's so still that we can hear each other breathing. When the squeeze comes full circle, I lead us as we all bend low, but I wait for the collective voice to begin the blessing, "Good show," which we say as we rise up, we raise our hands, twist around, and unclasp our twisted arms. And then hugs abound until the stage manager comes in and calls places, and everyone scurries off to start the show. A verbal ritual concludes the run of every production. When the last piece of scenery is put away and the stage is swept completely clean, actors, musicians, cast, adult leaders, crew, we all assemble and we sit in a circle, and one by one, each one of us thanks someone else anonymously for something we appreciate being given to us through the course of this production. It could be help with a particular skill. It could be nothing more than a listening ear. As students speak one by one, sometimes another student sheds a tear. Sometimes there's a sob as they recognize the full significance of kinship that was forged by their theater experience. Kinship in public school, through ritual, leads to gratitude. I spend hours planning for classes and rehearsals, but I also allow myself to experience the moment with my students, whether it's teaching puppeteers to breathe or leading them from betrayal to forgiveness, guiding their observation of the cosmos, or thinking on the spot myself who I wish to thank anonymously. I often teach as much by intuition as by intellect. I am in a constant state of intentional wakefulness, and I expect my students to be the same. I enter this state by being open to possibility, open to vulnerability. I often permit myself to feel as much as to find my way to guide them. I believe that we must recognize and honor the spiritual dimensions of theater education. Of course, other school activities like football, baseball, basketball, band, choir, visual art, Model United Nations, debate club, choir, orchestra, also engage students in work that is humanizing, complex, and profoundly deep. But too often, this kind of learning is relegated to extracurriculars and fine arts programs. A study that came out in an article titled "High School Doesn't Have to Be Boring" by Jet Mahal and Sarah Fine, that came out in 2019, researched over 30 schools across the country over several years and found that this sort of student-centered rigor is lacking in secondary core classes like math, science, language arts, and social studies. It's time for those of us who are committed to secondary education to think of core classes too as sites where the whole adolescent can grow, including their spiritual centers. Thank you.